Okay. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi, Truma is Perik Yud Aleph, Halacha Dalid, and the final Halacha in the Masechta Halacha Hey. We're learning today Daf Kuf Dalid. We left off on Kuf Dalid, Amid Aleph, all the way on top of the Amid. Now, we just learned on Kuf Gimel Amid Beis, we learned a Braisa, Tani Rabbi Chalafta ben Shaul, that one can purge meaning make Hagala with a earthenware utensil 3 times to cleanse it from its absorbed truma taste, which is a huge chiddush, because normally we know that a klei cheres has no solution when it comes to kashering the tam balua, because we say that even though when you put it in, you submerge it in boiling hot water, some of the taste will go out, some of it will remain, and that which remains won't remain stuck in it, but every time you'll put it into hot water, a bit more will come out. So that's a problem. But nevertheless, we learned a braisa. So on that, Amir Rabbi Ba, that is only true by Truma, not by Nevela. In other words, don't think that this braisa is arguing in principle with the rule that you cannot do Hagala to a klei cheres. You cannot. It agrees that you cannot. Truma is different. Now the problem will be, we'll begin today, it doesn't make sense. B'chlal Truma is a lot more serious than Nevela. They are both equally prohibited. We're speaking about Truma for a non-kohen. But Truma to an Kohen is a Misa B'dei Shamayim. Nevela is Chiyuv Malkus. And from the punishment, you understand the severity of the violation. So how ironic is it that Truma is going to be more lenient? That's going to be the opening topic of today. After we will conclude and explain the rationale behind the Tani Rabbi Chalafta ben Shaul, we will go me'inyan le'inyan, and we're going to speak about Truma, water that's being seeped in sediment of grapes of Truma. In other words, after you extract wine from grapes, you have what's called the shemarim, sediment, lees. There might be other words for that in English. And it's common that people would pour water and have the water steep in the lees. Then they would remove the water. So there's also perhaps some of the tam of the grapes in the water. And we're going to see here also certain rules of when will a kohen not be allowed to drink those waters, when will we come to a point where even a non-kohen is allowed to drink the waters. And from there, we're going to also see that there is differences between Ma'aser Sheni, Truma, and Kachim. Very similar to what we had in the beginning of the 3rd chapter at the end of Chagiga. There are different milas. And indeed, Ma'aser Sheni has the least amount of stringencies. Above that is Truma, and above that is going to be Kachim. And the final topic of Halachet Dalid is going to be that which the Mishnah says, that when is the Balabas required to notify the Kohen that he has Truma, and we're speaking about Trumas Ma'aser Shel Demai, Trumas Ma'aser Shel Demai, only if they have the minimum of an eighth of a loig, or a 64th of a loig. That means if they have that amount, it's chashuv enough for the person to be chayiv to notify the kohen to go pick it up. Even better if you deliver it to the kohen. Gemara is going to want to know, what do you do with the lesser from that? Don't think that the owner can have it, even though it's demai. He cannot. That will be a very, very interesting topic, and we're going to actually really qualify the law of the Mishnah. We're going to make it clear that the Mishnah is only speaking about Truma Temeya, with a lot of very interesting offshoots today, and we're going to learn, God willing, today the final Mishnah in the Masechta. We won't make a siyum in Mishnais because it's a very long Mishnah. We'll get through as much as we could get through, but let me just share a few words of introduction for this Mishnah, which is really fascinating. First of all, as a rule, animal food is not included in the dinim of tithing. The Mishnah will speak about certain type of food that during famine is consumed by people, even though it's normally designated for animal food. And since sometimes people eat it, mid-derabanan, it has to be tithed. But make no mistake, even when you tithe it, during normal years, not during famine years, the kohen is not going to eat it. Now, the Torah writes explicitly that the property, the kinyan kaspai of a kohen is allowed to eat truma. One of the items that are considered the acquisition of the kohen are his animals. Now we're going to begin to introduce Gavaldik. We'll begin as far as we can get. What happens if a Yisrael rents an animal that belongs to a kohen, or the other direction? Now, don't forget, during the time of the rental, the renter is chayiv to some level in achrayas. We know the dinim, whether a socher is like this, is like that, machlekes Ramei Rabbi Yehuda, but there's a certain amount of responsibility. At what point do we say that since the renter is responsible, he is the owner? The moment the renter is the owner, then the law of whether that animal fodder truma may be fed to the animals will work accordingly. And the general rule is that we don't view the renter as the owner, even though there's a lot of responsibility on the renter. So if a Yisrael rented an animal of a kohen, the Mishnah is going to tell you a huge chiddush, that the Yisrael is allowed to feed this animal fodder to that animal. Why? Because the animal belongs to a kohen. There's so many chidushim here. Even though you can argue if the Yisrael is chayiv midrabanan to separate from this type of animal fodder, because sometimes people eat it as truma, should he not have to give it to a kohen? So the Mishnah is going to tell you that giving it to the kohen's animal is like giving it to the kohen. We're going to get into more nuances of how that works. And the same thing vice versa. If a kohen who received this truma animal fodder is renting an animal that belongs to a Yisrael, under normal circumstances, the kohen is not allowed to feed that animal with that animal fodder because the animal belongs to a Yisrael. It's not kinyan kaspoy. And then from there, we'll see how far we can get. The Mishnah is going to speak about certain type of renting agreements, which actually halachically make the renter, during the time of the rental, be the owner of the animal, as we'll see in the Mishnah. Okay, Chevra Daf Kuf Dalet. So we are beginning with Hilchas Yoredeya, this huge chiddush, Tani Rabbi Chalafta ben Shol, that mitamal klei cheres do hagala 3 times for truma, and Amar Rabbi Ba not for nevela. So asks the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yosi, when Rabbi Ba said it, Mela, if Rabbi Ba would have said, no, we found a Tana that holds that you could purge a klei cheres, not 1 time, 3 times. Okay, we don't paskin like it, but at least it's going to be consistent. You're coming to me and telling me that even the leaning in Brais is only for truma. Doesn't make sense. Truma is more serious. But avoin misa. Misa means misa with shamayim, for a non-kohen to eat it. Nevela is simply subject to a lav, which means if you eat it, you get malchus. Umi oinsha or umi schara atanoida mohusa. Even though the Mishnah says, don't treat mitzvahs differently. The kala should be treated like the chamura. So why does the Torah give different punishments? First of all, how do you know it's kala? From the punishment. From the punishment, you know the severity of it. So truma is more serious. So va'at omar hachin, and yet you're telling me that when it comes to the dinim of belias, we could be more lenient. Why? So Rabbi Bar responds, these words are so important. Command the Omar that the Tani Rabbi Chalafta ben Shol is following the man the Omar, may Eilehem Kiblu Aleim Esamaisers. Kiblu Aleim, where do we find these words? We find it by Purim. We find it by the people accepting Devoira to be their Dayan. That Kiblu Aleim. Some similar to Ma'ariv Rishus, but we were Makabel on us like a Chayva. It's very important. First the simple, and then we're going to just unpackage it. The Gemara is saying that this Beraisa follows those who hold that Truma Bizman Azez Midrabana. So let's start with that. Nevela is an Isur Dairaisa. Truma Bizman Azez is Isur Darabanan. Yeah. So for an Isur Darabanan, you can do Hagala 3 times. It comes along the Rashba in the Torah Habayis, but this is a big debate in Yeredeya, based on Truma's Perek Yud Aleph, based on this. Would we say the same logic by other Isuri Derabanan? Very simple. So, for example, if someone had a keli in which they cooked chicken and milk, midoiraisa is not a problem, but it's a rabbinic prohibition. Would we say the same thing? Even if the keli is klei cheres, do hagala 3 times, and you're going to be good. Or even on the Rabbanans, look at the words of Rabbi Ba. He didn't say to the Rabbanan. He said, "May aleihem kiblu aleihem." It sounds like that even in rabbinic law, there are different levels. And the least strict are the ones, not that the Chachamim imposed. The people took it upon themselves. Malayim, it's like tfilas out of his rishus, even though we took it upon ourselves like a chayva. Now, we're not, God forbid, minimizing maitiv, but nevertheless, we do differentiate between shachris and mincha and maitiv. And according to that, only a type of a rabbinic law that may alayim kiblu alayim. In other words, there's so many ways of understanding it. What's me'alayim kiblu alayim? First of all, let's go back to this whole concept that we're following, that kedusha d'shoina of Yeshua, kitchel l'shaita v'loy kitchel l'asalavi. In other words, that kedusha was removed to some level when Nebuchadnezzar Melech Bavel conquered Israel. Now, when we resettled it, King and Chazaka. Let me word it like this. When we resettled the land, we did not have to imbue the land unless we chose to with so much Kedusha that would be Mechayev Trumas U'Maisros. We could have resettled the land and we could have not imbued the land with that level of Kedusha. It was our choice. And not only that, according to many, we already spoke it out, there are those who hold that during the Zman of Bayesheni, it was Taka Chayev Doiraisa. But since, in other words, once we decided to imbue it with that level of Kedusha, once it has that Kedusha, then you're Chayiv Midoiraisa. But since it was something that we chose, we said we are only giving it that Kedusha during the times that the temple will be standing. So when the Churban Bayesheni happened, but Derech Mamela, it went back to before, and after the Churban Abayis, it's not a normal rabbinic law, it's a very weak rabbinic law. That's the way many learn. On such a weak rabbinic law, we say that you can purge it 3 times. But you can't compare it to the normal din that Rabbanan, that they put a siyag. If you're going to have chicken and milk, you might end up having meat and milk or cooking meat and milk. That those rabbinic laws are much stronger. And there, we won't differentiate between Doirais and the Rabbanan Benegiyah din Hagala, and so we paskin. Just want to say. We don't paskin that by Yisura the Rabbanan. That means if a person uses a earthenware keli to have cholavakum, you have to break the keli. You can't, there's no solution. Okay. I needed to get it in there because we hold that cholavakum is also the Rabbanan. L'chaim. All of the resistance to that, azoidas. Says the Gemara.
Cholavakum, but not chol stam. Different.
There we go, Danny. The Gabbai has to get the last word. Say the Chagin. Rabbi Yuste bar Shunaim ba komi Rabbana. Tanina, in our Mishnah we learned, now you're going to get the Hemshech Hadvarim. If you remember what we finished off yesterday, that im hirkina, that even though you were not chayiv to have every single drop of oil or wine drip out of the barrel, but if you turn the barrel back up and umitzas and the oil gathered in the bottom, so the Mishnah made it clear, harezu truma. Harezu truma means, let me add a nuance that I didn't verbalize yesterday and 2 days ago. That now that it gathered in the bottom, you're not allowed to add chulin. In other words, when the Mishnah said that if you poured out the oil, and once it went into the dripping stage and 3 drops went out, now you can add chulin, that's when you look inside, you don't see the oil gathered in one place. Because the oil is all over the walls. So you can add chulin. When the Mishnah says that if you incline it back up and it sits there and it gathers in the bottom, that's the meaning of umitzas. Now that if you look in the barrel and you see oil, which is truma oil, you're not allowed to put chulin. So what do you have to do now? If you want to use the barrel for chulin, you have to scrape it out. You have to take it out. And by the way, you can do the same thing. You can turn it upside down. If it's only going to drip, wait for 3 new drips to come out and then add on chulin wine. But prior to that, you can't add on chulin. That means that we are being machshiv, even the little remnant. We're giving chashivos to it. So now the Gemara, look at the Gemara's logic. If that's the case, we should give the same chashivos to the taste of truma that's swallowed in the walls of the keli, and we should not allow you to simply do hagala 3 times and to get rid of it. Now let me add another detail. I understand the hemshech hadvarim. Now that Rabbi Bas said that by nevela, even 3 times purging it is not enough. What is he saying with that? He's saying that when you take a klei cheres, even though you put it under, you submerge it in boiling hot water, there will always be a little bit left inside the walls. So you can never get rid of it fully. So it's not like after you did it 3 times, there's nothing left. Then it would be good for nevela. There is something left. So why am I allowed to use it? Because you're telling me it's not so, it's the Rabbanon. It's not so chashuv. We tolerate a little bit. Well, if that's the case, if I have the first case where there's oil in the bottom of the barrel, why don't I say it's only Tumah the Rabbanon? It's the same Mishnah. Let me tolerate that. Why are we differentiating? Va'at amarachin. So he answers, Amalei, we get it ourselves. Al yedei ha'ur nigal v'yoytze. When you purge it, you're right that some of it remains inside. You got it. It's not completely purged. Even after the triple purging. That's why by nevela it's not good. But after you purge it 3 times, what's left inside is very, very little. The Mishnah doesn't, it's interesting. I thought the Gemara would answer, this is Belias, this is Be'en. We don't give that answer. We're saying that even if we're going to compare the Belias to the little in the bottom, it's much less. It's a less because you purged it 3 times. And for the record, prior to the oil gathering to the bottom, I am allowed to add chulin. But once it gathers in one place and you can see it, you can't say that it's a nothing. It's something. You see it. And that's why you can't add it.
Okay. Rabbi, if you purge it with hot water and soap and the tam goes away, that doesn't count?
Very good. So Kavan is adding something which is used by Rabbanim today, halacha l'maisa, and that is that aside of the Hagala advantage, in most cases, solution, just to be aware, nois and tam levgam, certainly we paskin b'di'evid is okay. Not only is waiting 24 hours or more, poigim automatically the tam that is nivla in the keli, but when you add any type of washing detergent, even if you just use that keli, like when you put something in a dishwasher, no one likes the taste of soap, Aviv. And the taste of soap, which taka mixes, it also gets, when you go through a dishwasher, the heat is very high. So what's now inside the walls of the keli, the tam of the non-kosher food, here the tam of the truma, in other words, non-kosher for a non-kohen, and tam of soap. So it's poigemet, there's a pigima. And that certainly allows you, b'di'evet, to make use of it. But don't forget, Kevan, that when it comes to nois and tam levgam, we also learned it in our Masechta, and so many paskin, that if someone was poigemet lechatchila, since ein mevatlin iser lechatchila, for the guy who did it b'mezid, sometimes there'll be a penalty. You can't get it both ways. You can't be poigemit and then say, oh, now it's a tam nivgam.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Rabbi Mendel, it's also just differentiating. Let's not confuse the be'en again, but the Gemara didn't say that, and the tam nivla. Okay, now me'inyan le'inyan. Now that we spoke about this leniency of Tani Rabbi Chalafta ben Shol, that Hagala 3 times works, interesting, the number 3, it's very similar. So we spoke about it in the intro, that you have sediment or lees. This is after you made wine, you have the remnants of the klipa and whatever remained from the grapes. It was common for people to use that. How would they use that? They would put water on it, cold water. There's no heat here. But simply the shemarim would steep in the water. Some of its taste would go into the water. They would then remove the sediment, or you can call that temed. We want to know whether that water is usher to a non-kohen. Says the Braisa, shemarim shel teruma. It's very similar. Harishain v'hasheni yasser. Amazing. Every time you put water and you have it steep in the sediment, the wine taste becomes progressively weaker. Something remains in it, it goes into the water. Next time, it's even less. So the Braisa says the 3rd time is already okay. And by the way, that's not after 3 times. It's not by Hagala, you have to do Hagala 3 times and then it's okay. Here, at the 3rd go around, since you already did it twice, a non-kohen can have it. However, just to clarify, but Medvar says the Braisa that you did it in the way we described, which is that you place water inside the sediment. The sediment is inside the water. The sediment is steeping in the water. There is where the water takes more out of the sediment. So therefore, after you did it twice, even though there was something, it's insignificant. Many say only because Truma is Midrabanan. The same logic. By Truma D'Oraisa, we wouldn't say it. Truma D'Rabanan. Even by Truma derabanan, avol loy nasan l'toich hamayim. But if what you did was not that you steeped the sediment in water, what did you do? You squeezed out the sediment. Squeezed it once, squeezed it twice. Even by the third squeeze, doesn't matter. What's coming out is unadulterated remnant of the truma. Even though you're going to get a lesser quantity, but the quality doesn't change. So it makes no difference. Afilu shlishi will be usher, like we said, because it's mamish unadulterated. Now, when do we say, going back to the nasan l'toichan mayim, that if the sediment was seeping in the water, that harishan v'hasheni usher shlishi muter, that's only for truma. In contrast, if you have shumarim shalmaiser sheni, we're more lenient. Only rishay nasr, and the sheni is already muter. Laws of Meiser Sheni are more lenient than Truma. Open up, like we said, Pei de Gimel de Chagiga, the whole third chapter, the different milas for Truma Tara, but it's Me'inyan le'inyan. And just like we learned over there that there's Meiser Sheni Truma Kachim, we're going to have it here in a moment. But before we get there, Meir Oimer, he says that Hasheni ben Noisen Tam, that he's more machmer by Meiser Sheni. He doesn't give you a heter across the board that after you did it once, going forward, you're good. If you seeped the shmarim time number 2 by Meiser Sheni, even if there is still the slightest flavor in the water, you can't have it outside Yerushalmi. But even according to Rabbi Meir, Meiser Sheni is more lenient than Truma. By Truma, he doesn't say B'nois and Tam. By Truma, the second time soaking cannot be eaten by a non-Kohen. Even if the Kohen is telling you there's no Tam of Yayin. By Meiser Sheni, we subject it. So he's more lenient, but not as much as the Tanakama. And now comes the Amoira, Rabbi Yochanan, B'Shem, Rabbi Shimon ben Zajac, that now that we see the Braisa goes Meiser Sheni Truma, let me add that when it comes to Kodesh would mean Aviv, you have grapes that were consecrated to the Beis HaMikdash, because the Beis HaMikdash has to make wine. So we're not talking about grapes that are imbued with Kedushas Haguf. I know that. Grapes don't go on the altar, but still, it belongs to the Beis HaMikdash. Here we say, Kim Minyanai. Now, Kim Minyanai is understood, the way we're going to learn it, means no matter how many times you seep it in water, I don't care. Those waters are Hegdish property, highest level of stringency when it comes to Kachim. And now, again, Kleicheres that absorbs Tam Truma, we learn to leniency. Let us learn from topic to topic another din of Kleicheres. These are exciting dinim. So first of all, when the Torah says that the ziva of a zav, that means that the bodily fluids that are part of this illness, whether it's called gonorrhea, someone told me, or whatever the machla is called, in which there is some type of unhealthy seminal emission from a man, that has the level of av. The bodily fluid has a level of av hatuma. And as Chazal tell us, it's not only that bodily fluid. Once the person is determined as to be a zav, other bodily liquids that are similar to that, like urine, that they gather prior to them being expelled, they also have the level of av hatuma. So now, what are we talking about? They didn't have plumbing then. So there's something called, I think, a chamber pot. I don't know if that's the right word, or a urinal. So what people did was, what do people do? So they had in their rooms, without plumbing, they had a utensil that became disgusting, that was used for people to urinate in. If a zav urinated in it, think about it. We're speaking about dinim. So you have the urine is an av. The urine gets absorbed in the kleicheres. Just for the record, it doesn't get absorbed as much as cooking. There's no cooking here. But still, when it's just laying in there until when the guy throws it out in the morning. So some of the urine gets absorbed in the kleicheres. Just to know another detail, at some point that utensil became so disgusting that people broke it, and you would have shards. So it was not uncommon for you to have charson shel zav. You would have a little piece of earthenware that was part of the urinal, part of the chamber pot. What's the issue? Tell you what the issue is. Something that's tummy on the level of an av from a zav can impart tuma not only by touch. If it would only imparted bimaga, the urine is absorbed in the shard. There's no urine on the outside of the shard. But since there is urine absorbed and zav, and that which goes out of the zav in this category, which includes his urine, is metama b'masa. Masa means if I carry the zav, I become tummy. Carrying means if I moved him, even though I didn't touch him. Here, if I move this shard, even though I'm not touching the urine, I'm moving the urine. Will I become tummy? That's the bottom line. The answer is yes. So what should you do to prevent proliferation of tuma? Simply rinse the shard. So here again, we're now rinsing the shard. Didn't we say that klecheres, you can't purge it? Hold on. If it absorbed the tam through heat, then you are right. By biblical laws, perhaps even by other rabbinic laws, you can never purge it. Here, the urine got absorbed without heat. So you could expel it. Now we got to hold the background. So some of it goes in, but it gets simply by rinsing it. It's porous, not because of 24 hours. It's porous because it's porous, and maybe Rabbi Mendel is saying because it's sharp, the urine. Could be. Some of it goes in, but we say it. So acharson shal zav, after you wash it only once, one rinsing, washing. I don't know how you define wash. One washing is not enough. It's still tamei. Right? Unlike we just learned over here by the third time. Here by the second time. Once you rinsed it second time, v'hasheni, it's start. Just very similar. And here again says the Braisa. Now you have to know how to read this. We're going to go shenosan l'toichan mayim, that you put the shards in the water. That mamish cleans it. If you didn't use water, so how did you cleanse it? Says the Rasher Elio, 6 lines in the bottom on the left side. Before someone broke that shard, a non-zav urinated in it many times. So you would think that what? That just like it absorbed the urine of the zav, we are saying right now that water, it's not only that water that you wash it with water, the water goes in. That's not enough. The water goes in and it somehow rinses out the urine that went in prior. Well, if water can rinse it, maybe urine can rinse it. Urine from a non-tamei person. So the Braisa says, no, we don't say that. Why don't we say that? Says the Rasher Elio. This Braisa is following the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda that holds min b'minoi is not batel. It's amazing how we apply this dinim over here. It's gavaldik. Min b'minoi loy batel. In other words, you don't fully purge it out. Elamah, the water at some point nullifies the little bit of the urine that remained. Because water, whether it's you need a bittul b'roiv, whether you need to have a bittul, I don't know, whatever the number is. When you rinse it out, we're not claiming that it rinses it fully out. But there's new waters that overwhelm the urine. But if you have urine from a tahar person, since urine and urine min b'minoi is not batel, gavaldik. Okay.
I will never remember that.
Yeah, I think I'll always remember this, like gavaldik. Okay. The final halacha in the Mishnah, we made a link between this and Soita Daf Hey about the Shminis of Shminis. The Mishnah is saying that when it comes to Trumas Meiser of the Mai, and we learned Masechtas the Mai. So Michal, we're speaking about a product that biblically is presumed to be tithed. The Chachamim decided to be stringent and to still obligate the owner, the chaver, to take off some of the tithing obligations, including Trumas Meiser. And he took it off. Now, normally, when a Yisrael or a Levi, if they own Truma, no, they don't have to run and give it to the Kohen right away, but they have to notify the Kohen that they have Truma for them. And by the way, for the record, that's Parshas Kisavai, twice in the cycle of 7 years, that's the whole thing of Vidoi Meiser, they are obligated to give it to the Kohen. There's a Machlekes Rishonim, whether it's Erev Pesach of the 4th year and of the 7th year, or whether it's during Chol HaMoed Pesach, before Pesach and middle, before the end of Pesach, whichever it is, it's 4th and 7th. But normally you don't have to give it. I'm just clarifying. The Mishnah says giving it. We said it's not giving it, it's notifying. Comes the Mishnah with a chiddush that if you have such a small amount of Trumas Meiser of the Mai, that it's not even an eighth of a loig, it's not even 1 in 64 of a loig, you don't even have to notify the coin. Garnished. But garnish means what? You can eat it? What does it mean? What do you do with it? So that's what the Gemara is going to discuss. So Rabbi Yudan, who is the Bara Chosid, Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina, he was the nephew, he was the son of Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina's sister. He says in the name of Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina that if you take a half Pachos Mikan less than the 1 of 64th, look at his words. Noisen b'neiroi. We're going to learn pshat that the non-kohen, the Yisrael, is allowed to use it as fuel. Now, what will become very clear is that the Mishnah is only speaking about a product that's tamei. Forget about the quantity. We're speaking about Trumas Meiser Shel Damai that is already tamei, which means that when you do give it to the kohen, the normal, or when the kohen picks it up, what could the kohen use it for? Only for fuel. So now he's saying a big chiddush. The fact that the Mishnah says that if you have such a small amount, you don't even have to give it to the kohen. You know why? Because you, the Yisrael, you are allowed to get hana from its fuel. It's a huge chiddush. Now, how? Don't forget, it's only demai. No, demai is only midrabanan. We already learned at our times that even by demai you don't have to give it, right? If you have guests, if they're poor, right? You learn 2 exceptions where you can give demai to people. You have soldiers staying in your home, you can give them demai. So, yeah, another link, that's what the Rash says. Okay, nois b'neiroi, daf kuf dalad amid beis. Hold on. So now, first of all, the measure of 1/64th of a loig is only referring to a product that's liquid. It's a liquid measure. So the Mishnah is talking about oil of the mai or wine of the mai. How do we translate that if you have a solid? The Mishnah didn't say. The Gemara is going to say that Rabbi Yanai b'shem Rabbi Yudan, that ba'oichel, same. Ba'oichel kedei, not lavashel, kedei beitza kala. In other words, we're speaking about the quantity of what we have a chicken's egg. If you have less than that amount of food, then same, let's go back to what we just said, that the owner, the Yisrael, is allowed to use it for himself for fuel. Mechol demai means produce that belongs to a am haaretz, who most of them separated all of the tithings, but at some point during the times of the Second Temple, they became a bit lax, and the rabbinate decided that some of the tithings we rely that they did properly, or we can rely enough. And for some of the tithings, including Trumas Meiser, the owner has to separate it and normally give it to a kohen. Trumas Meiser is 1% of the total. Truma is 2%. If I buy a produce during the times of the Second Temple onwards from a non-chaver, from a person who's not known to be very careful in these laws, I don't have to separate Truma. The presumption is everyone separated Truma, but the halachic, the rabbinic presumption is that the person perhaps did not separate Meiser Rishon, and therefore he didn't separate Trumas Meiser. And it doesn't matter more details. Okay. Now, says the Gemara. Now, see, we're going in an opposite direction. So they're speaking about what do you do with it? You can use it as fuel. That has in it a premise. If we would be speaking about Truma Tohoira, which never may be used as fuel because you're not safeguarding it, makes absolutely no sense that the Yisrael should be allowed a noisen b'neiroi. The fact that the noisen b'neiroi is still a chiddush, but it would only work if we're speaking about something that's tamei anyways. That means if you would give it to the kohen anyways, he would only use it as fuel. So we're saying it's such a small amount, you can use it as fuel. But that means we're speaking about truma tameya. Very good, says the Gemara. Hadad the Tamar, from this discussion, it comes out that our Mishnah is only speaking about a product that's already tamei. And therefore, just like the Mishnah is speaking about a liquid that's tamei, when you have Rabbi Yanai b'shem Rabbi Yudan, that translates the liquid measure into a dry measure. I know it's not the same, but it's the idea. There is a minimum amount, which is the size of an egg. Ha-kebetzas also betame, meaning that if you have food, and the food is trumas, meiser, sheldemai, that's tahar, even if you have the amount of a chardel, you have a little nothing of an amount, you're not allowed to use it. You're not allowed to eat it. You know what you have to do? Afilu kosh sarich lahachzir. You have to go and notify the client that it's available. And another detail, even if it's tamei, when is a Yisrael allowed to use it for himself? Only because it's demai, zemai. What is this? Aval bevade, but when it comes to normal trumas meiser, even bisman hazeh, even kiblu al me'aleim, bein tamei, bein tar, bein roiv, bein muat, always sarich lahachzir. That's very clear. We really limit. We mamish limit, you get it? The leniency of the Mishnah. It's still a huge chiddush. No, that's another trivia question, where you can have a Yisrael who is lechatchila making use of Truma Tameya. Where is that allowed? It's allowed if it's Demai, and it's Tamei, and it's less than the 164th, or it's less than a Kabetz. Okay. Now we are starting, my friends, the Siyum, meaning we're starting the last Mishnah. It's a long Mishnah. God willing, we'll get to the bottom of the Amit. Really, we're going to be touching upon laws of ownership. That means that I know that the example spoken about is about Truma, but it's much more than Truma. It's about Dinei Kinyanim, and there are different levels of ownership. So it's not a hard and fast rule. The type of ownership or acquisition that we are discussing is the level of ownership that a kohen has to have, whether it's in a slave, whether it's in an animal. The topic will be in an animal that will qualify that animal as the kinyan kaspai of the kohen. And why do we have to qualify the animal that way? Only when the animal is the acquisition of the kohen is that animal allowed to be fed truma. Now, like we said in the intro, hold on, don't think that animal food is truma. Generally, animal food will never become trumad, even if a guy, it's nonsensical. So you have to, so the Mishnah gives the example. Karshine. Karshine is some sort of bitter vetch. I don't know what that means. I know the words in English, and even Kavan's pictures won't help me. Bitter vetch is a type of animal food that is normally Michael Behema, but bishnas, bishnei re'avan, during famine, people eat it. Al derech dog food in America. However you define a famine in America. So this is very important. So the Chachamim said that it's a type of food that is upgraded to Michael Adam during famine, always, even not during famine, rabbinically has to be tithed. But let's speak about not famine. So we have this vetch. So I tithed it. Don't think that the kohen is going to eat it. He won't. It's animal food. So what do you do with it? You give it to the kohen's animal. That's the topic. In other words, we're finding a case where you can have animal food, but it's qualified as truma, which means only the kinyan kaspoi of the kohen is allowed to eat it. Okay, so that's simple. So if the animal belongs to him, you can. If it belongs to Yisrael, not. And now dinei schirus. So says the Mishnah, kashine truma. No, before dinei schirus, kashine truma. First of all, if you have this bitter vetch of truma midrabanan, you don't say, oh, since the rabbi says you have to tithe it, now the kohen has to eat it. No, give it to animals. But there's nuance in that. What's nuance in that? There are animals that depend on the owner to be fed, and you have certain animals that do not depend on the owner to be fed. That means even, people had dove nests, shoivachs, dove coat. What I'm saying now, I'm not certain in. But I know that in general, there are animals that I can own, but they eat off the wild. Those animals, I'm not allowed to feed if I'm a kohen, karshine truma. In other words, if it's not upon me to feed them, if they would get food anyways, if I'm not going out of pocket anyways, me giving them truma food is called wasting the truma food. Don't forget, there's a din of, that's the whole pedic, that you have to safeguard, mishmeres, be shomer. Shomer means the animals that I am chayiv to feed, which could include behema. Behema is the norm. The domesticated animals are animals that they depend on the owner to feed. Even animals in the category of chayis, some of them also depend on the owner to feed. Here, it's not so uncommon that people have in their home pets that are in the category of chayis. But a type of animal that now that you're feeding them, a kohen can feed karshine truma. And then Tarnagoyim. Tarnagoyim means because Tarnagoyim is fed, the chiyuv is on the owner. if they find enough foods, always. But other types of birds, that's the whole word. Why did the Mishnah mention Tarnagoyim? Because other types of birds, they're more resourceful. And any creature that vadai will not go hungry, which means the owner doesn't have to feed them, the kohen is not allowed to feed them with truma. But if he's chayiv to feed them, that's called making proper use of the truma. So that's the number one. Now, Zok the Mishnah, this is great. Yisrael shesachar parami kohen, a normal case of rental. In other words, the owner is a kohen. The Yisrael rented it. You would think, you might have thought that since during the period of the rental, the Yisrael is obligated in achrayas. He has a certain level of responsibility. Maybe that level of responsibility makes him to be owner, part owner. If he's owner, then he disowns the kohen. We don't say that. We say that even though the Yisrael is chayiv on some level to take care of the animal that he's renting, we view the animal to be 100% owned by the owner, by the kohen, which is to the... So that's number one. So first of all, it's king and kaspai. Number two, another chiddush. We're speaking about a Yisrael, my friend. We're not speaking about that I rented an animal from a kohen and the kohen gave me a doggy bag. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about a Yisrael. I'm a Yisrael. I have a field of karshinim. I separated as I have to truma gedoyla from this bitter vetch, but I have to give it to a kohen. I didn't yet give it to a kohen. Says the Mishnah, you know what I am allowed to do? I can feed that karshinim to the animal that belongs to the kohen. We view it as if I gave it to the owner, and then the owner told me, you know what? Feed it to my animals. The renter, has to feed the animals anyway. The renter has to feed the animals anyway. So we're trying just to make sure that no one is abusing, no one is taking advantage of the other. So the Marafulda says a Gavaldik Svara, that when a person is only fulfilling their duty of feeding the animal that they rented, it's like if you own the car, not me, other people, they're going to put in what's it called, unleaded fuel. If it's a car rental...
87.
Huh?
87.
They'll put in 87. I don't know if that's... It's not yours. In other words...
Not the 91. Not the 91.
91, 87. That's the word. That's what he says. That the kohen, the owner of the animal, is happy that you are giving it your truma. What are you talking about? You have to give the truma to a kohen. No, he knows that if you are feeding him, not out of your pocket, if the Yisrael is feeding the animal out of the truma pocket, he's going to be generous. The animal is going to be well fed. Nichalei. Don't give it to me. Give it to the animal straight. Okay. All of these steps you have to know. So Yisrael shach barami kohen machila karshine truma. Again, that will be a logic. The Yisrael has to feed it anyways. So you're not stealing truma. No, you're not stealing truma. It's as if you gave it to the owner, and the owner gave it back to you to give to the animal. What was that? Yes, there is.
And is it okay?
I skipped the line. Yes, that's the whole vart here. That we consider it to be the hana of the kohen, not of the Yisrael, even though he's also getting hana. Zenehena v'zenehena, not a problem. And the same thing in reverse. We're being consistent. I skipped the line that if the kohen shesachar para mi Yisrael, if the kohen rented the cow from a Yisrael, who is the owner halachically here? The Yisrael. So it's king and kaspai of whom? Of the Yisrael here, even though the kohen now is obligated to feed the animal, so why can't the kohen claim, I received before karshinim, it's mine, let me do it? No, you can't do that, because the animal is not yours. Lo yachileno karshine truma. Hold on. Based on that, the Mishnah will give an exception. And let me give you one type of an exception, and that's called Yisrael Shesham, Shuma, Paramikoyin. My friends, this is the rule of rental, or really of borrowing. The rule. If I rent something from you, if I borrow something from you, what would happen if that article, that item depreciated while I had it? When I got the car, that type of car was worth $1,000, and I rented it for a year. When I give it back to you, even it's going to be, what happens if the price of cars go down? or the regular wear and tear for which I'm not responsible makes it worth less. The renter or the borrower don't have to pay the difference. Doesn't work that way. This is how you see that even when the renter had it, it's not his. That's why if there is a depreciation, whose loss is it? The owner's. But what happens if there's an agreement? I'm a renter and I rent your animal, but before I rent it from you, the owner, you insist, I want this animal evaluated. The animal is worth $100. When I get this animal back, if it's worth 1 penny less than $100, whether it's from the wear and tear, whether it's because the market value fell, I don't care. I am chayiv to make up the difference.
That's why they videotape the rental.
They're very good. No. I don't know if that's an accurate statement. I'm speaking about a case where the value of cars go down, Kevan. In other words, what we are saying over here is, listen to this, is that if the renter took upon himself to return the item and to compensate for any type of depreciation, even not regular wear and tear, that makes the renter be considered the owner during the time of the rental. So now it's flipped. So if the animal belongs to a kohen and the Yisrael rents it, if it's shesham parami kohen, who's considered the owner of the animal during the rental? The Yisrael. He cannot give it karshinei truma. But the opposite. But if the renter is a kohen, the animal belongs to a Yisrael, but they were made the shuma, then he is allowed to give it. I'll just read the words and we'll stop over here. Yisrael shesham parami kohen. Here the opposite, even though it doesn't belong to the kohen during the rental. Lo yachilanu karshinei truma. But in the opposite, the kohen shesham parami Yisrael, he's the owner during the time of the rental. Machila karshinei truma. Gevaldik, to be continued.
Rabbi.
Yes.
Is there an extension in Hilchos Shabbos vis-a-vis using kalim on Shabbos? Because like the same way you're not allowed to work on Shabbos,
very good.
Kalim or your animals also not allowed to work
kalim,
on
just
Shabbos.
remember, Danny, right? Shvisas kalim is a whole machlokes, whether we're not so makbid. But the shvisas behema, I think it's a great correlation. Let's keep on going. This is huge. I know one thing, that it doesn't always have to follow the same rules, but